I requested a room transfer in December, 5 days before the university sent out the email closing my entire floor. Housing thought I was lucky, that I'd somehow anticipated structural problems nobody else saw coming. I didn't correct them. I'm 21, studying environmental science at UW-Madison, and I'm the kind of person who needs logical explanations for things. But I can't explain why I left that room when I did, or what I would have found if I'd stayed. I'd describe myself as pretty level-headed, not someone who gets spooked easily. When I signed my housing contract for this semester, I was actually excited. I'd gotten into one of the newly renovated freshman wings in Cronshaig Hall. They just finished updating the whole west side. New floors, better lighting, individual thermostats. For upperclassmen overflow housing, it was a steal. The digital lease came through 3 days before move-in. I signed it on my phone while waiting for coffee. Standard stuff: damage deposits, quiet hours, guest policies. I didn't read every word. Nobody does. Move-in day was August 20th. My room was 347W, third floor, corner unit. When I unlocked the door, I was hit with that specific smell of fresh paint and new carpet. The room was small, but clean. Twin bed, desk, dresser, and 2 tall metal lockers built into the wall near the bathroom, the kind with ventilation slats at the top. The bottom locker had a simple latch. The top one had a latch and a small metal loop for a padlock, though no lock was provided. I moved my stuff in, met my floormates, did the usual orientation activities. Everything felt normal. Good, even. The building was quiet. Most of the floor was upperclassmen like me or graduate students. We kept to ourselves. It was 4 days later when I actually looked at my lease again. I needed to check something about the parking policy, so I pulled up the PDF on my laptop. That's when I saw it, at the very end of the document, below the signature line. A single sentence in the same font as everything else. Do not open the top locker after midnight. I stared at it. I was sure it hadn't been there when I'd signed. I would have remembered something that weird. I scrolled through the rest of the document. Everything else was standard university housing language. Just that one line, sitting there like it had always belonged. I checked the metadata. The document had last been modified on August 18th, the day I signed it. But I'd skimmed the whole thing that day, hadn't I? I'd tried to remember. I'd been distracted, rushing, caffeinated, and impatient. I told myself I must have missed it. Some quirky holdover from the building's renovation. Maybe a joke from the housing staff. I mentioned it to my neighbor, Lena, a grad student in physics. She frowned. That's weird. Let me check mine. She pulled out her phone, opened her lease, scrolled to the bottom. Huh. Yeah, same thing. I never noticed that. Do you have the top locker or bottom? I asked. Top. You? Bottom. I just threw my extra blankets up there and put my clothes in the bottom one. Lena shrugged. Probably some old building code thing. This wing used to be connected to the old infirmary before they sealed it off. There was an infirmary here? Yeah, way back. 50s or 60s, I think. They closed it and converted the space, but some of these rooms used to share a wall with it. I only know because I requested records when I was looking into the building's heating system for a project. She said it casually, but something about it stuck with me. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the top locker. It was stupid, but I kept glancing at it. Just a metal door with slates. I'd opened it once on move-in day and tossed some storage bins inside. I hadn't looked since. At 11:43 p.m., I got up and opened it. Inside, my bins, some shoes, a winter coat. Nothing unusual. The back wall was the same pale institutional beige as the rest of the room. Solid. I knocked on it. Normal sound. I closed the locker and went to bed, feeling ridiculous. But I didn't open it after midnight. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to feel like I was tempting fate, even if I didn't believe in that stuff. 3 weeks passed. Classes picked up. I settled into a routine. I barely thought about the locker. Then one Friday night, I came home late from a study group, around 12:30 a.m. I was tired and I needed my phone charger, which I was pretty sure I'd left in one of the bins in the top locker. I stood in front of it. The room was dark except for the light from the hallway bleeding under the door. I reached for the latch, then stopped. My hand was an inch away. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I didn't open it. I used my laptop's charger instead. The next morning, I opened it before class. The charger was right there, coiled in the bin where I'd left it. I felt like an idiot. But that night, I had the first dream. I was standing in my room in the dark. The top locker was open. Inside, instead of my things, there was a hallway, long, narrow, lit by dim yellow lights. I could see doorways along the walls, some open, some closed. I could hear something, a rhythmic sound, beeping, like hospital monitors, but not quite in sync. I woke up at 3 a.m., sweating. I didn't think much of it. Stress, bad pizza, whatever. But I had the same dream 2 more times that week. Always the same. The locker, the hallway, the beeping. And each time I felt like I was supposed to walk into it. I started asking around, carefully, casually. I asked people on my floor if they'd seen the lease addendum. Most hadn't noticed. A few had. Nobody seemed bothered by it. One guy, Jordan, laughed and said he'd opened his top locker at like 2 a.m. once and nothing happened. "Why'd you open it?" I asked. "I needed my headphones." "Why, you scared of yours?" I said no, but I was lying. It was October when I met Dr. Halford. I'd gone to the university archives to research a paper, and I got talking with the archivist, an older woman who'd worked there for decades. I mentioned Cronsheg, the renovations, and she perked up. "Oh, the West Wing. That was a big project. They had to seal off a lot of old infrastructure from when it connected to the infirmary." "What was the infirmary used for?" I asked. "General student health initially, but in the late 60s they had a wing for isolation cases, contagious illnesses, psychiatric holds, that sort of thing. There was a hallway that connected it to the dormitory so they could move patients discreetly." My stomach dropped. A hallway? Yes, ran behind the walls. They sealed it during renovations in the 90s, but the university kept some of the old structural elements, cheaper than tearing everything out. She paused. "Why do you ask?" I made something up and left. That night, I stood in front of the top locker at 11:58 p.m. I don't know what I was trying to prove. I watched the clock on my phone tick to midnight, then to 12:01. I opened the locker. My bins, my coat, the back wall, beige and solid. I pressed my palm against it. Cool metal. I knocked. It sounded hollow. Not empty hollow, but like there was space behind it, a gap. I closed the locker and sat on my bed. My hands were shaking. I didn't open it after midnight again, but the dreams got worse. Now in the dreams, I was walking down the hallway. The doors were numbered. Some had windows, small and reinforced. I couldn't see inside, but I could hear things. Breathing, scratching. Once, I heard my name. I started sleeping at Lena's place a couple nights a week, making excuses. She didn't ask questions. In mid-November, the heat in my room started acting up. It would spike at random times, making the room unbearably hot, then drop to freezing. Maintenance came 3 times. They couldn't find anything wrong. The third guy, an older man with graying hair, asked which room I was in. 347W, I said. He nodded slowly. West Wing. Yeah, we've had some calls from those rooms. Heating's tricky there because of the old ductwork, used to connect to the infirmary section. Is the ductwork still there? Some of it, sealed off, but it's still in the walls. Sometimes air gets through. Air from where? He looked uncomfortable. From the sealed sections, I guess. Don't worry about it. We'll get it sorted. They didn't. The smell started a week later. Faint, antiseptic, like rubbing alcohol and something else I couldn't place. It was strongest near the lockers. I reported it. Maintenance came again, found nothing. They said it was probably cleaning products from the renovation off-gassing. But it got stronger. One night in early December, I woke to the smell overwhelming my room. It was 2:15 a.m. I got up, dizzy and nauseous, and opened my door to air the place out. The hallway was empty and silent. I stood there, breathing in the cooler air, when I heard it. A sound from inside my room, metal on metal. the latch of the top locker clicking open. I turned. My door was open, light from the hallway spilling in. I could see the top locker from where I stood. The door was ajar, just an inch. I hadn't touched it. I didn't go back inside. I slept in the floor lounge that night. The next day, in full daylight, I went back. The locker was closed. I opened it. Everything normal. I pulled the bins out, checked the back wall. Solid. I don't know what I expected to find. But I started keeping a chair wedged against the lockers at night. Finals week, I was barely in my room. I stayed in the library, at friends' places, anywhere else. I told myself it was just stress, that I'd feel better after the semester ended. On the last day before winter break, I packed up my stuff. I had to empty the top locker. I did it at noon, lights on, door open. I pulled everything out, checked every corner. Nothing, just a metal box. As I was leaving, I ran into Lena in the stairwell. She looked exhausted. Thank God this semester's over. I've been having the worst insomnia and the weirdest dreams. Yeah? I tried to sound casual. Yeah, I keep dreaming I'm walking through this hallway. Old yellow lights. It's connected to my room somehow, like through the wall. I can hear people in the rooms off the hallway, but I can't see them. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Super creepy. Stress dreams, right? I didn't tell her I'd had the same ones. I went home for break. I didn't think about the room, the locker, any of it. I slept fine. No dreams. But I requested a room transfer for spring semester. They approved it. I'm in a different building now, South Campus. Newer construction, no lockers, no weird lease addendums, no smells or sounds. I'm fine now. I sleep through the night. But last week, I was going through my emails and found an automated message from University Housing dated December 23rd. A mass email sent to all Cronshog Hall West Wing residents. It said that due to unforeseen structural concerns, rooms on the third floor West Wing would remain closed for spring semester pending further inspection. Residents had been reassigned. I hadn't received that email before my transfer request. I'd moved before they sent it. I looked up the building records, the ones Lena mentioned. The old infirmary's isolation wing had 17 rooms. They were numbered 301 through 317. My room, 347, would have been built directly over where room 307 used to be. I found one more thing. A digitized log from 1968, a handwritten note in a facilities report. It mentioned that ventilation between the dormitory and infirmary isolation wing had been insufficient and that air exchange through shared ductwork and wall cavities was being investigated after complaints of odors and sounds crossing between sections. The note recommended sealing the connection points. It was dated March 1968. There's no record of whether they actually did it. I don't know what was in that locker. I don't know what I would have found if I'd opened it at the right time. Or the wrong time. I don't know if the hallway in my dreams was real, or just something my mind built from stress and suggestion and bad air. But I do know that I didn't request the room transfer because of the email. I requested it 5 days before the email was sent. And I know that whatever made me refuse to open that locker after midnight wasn't caution or superstition. It was the feeling, every single night at 12:01 a.m., that something on the other side was waiting for me to let it through. The first time I heard my name come through the wall, I was alone in my dorm room, and I understood immediately that some sounds aren't meant to travel forward. They're meant to stay buried with the people who made them. I was 21 when I moved into the dorm at USC, junior year, film studies major, and I'd spent the previous summer sleeping on my sister's couch in Pasadena after a bad breakup left me scrambling for housing. By the time I got my room assignment, most of the good spots were taken. I ended up in Party Tower, 5th floor, a single that faced the parking structure. The room was small, outdated, and the walls had this strange texture, not quite stucco, not quite plaster. just rough and pale yellow, like old teeth. I didn't notice the holes right away. It took about a week. I was lying in bed one night, couldn't sleep, just staring at the wall beside my desk. The streetlight from outside came through at an angle, and that's when I saw them. A grid pattern, maybe 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall, just above the baseboard. Tiny holes, each one perfectly circular, drilled with surgical precision. They were arranged in neat rows, about an inch apart, 50 or 60 of them, I'd guess. I got up and ran my finger across them. They went deep. I couldn't feel a back wall when I poked my pinky into one. The plaster around each hole was smooth, beveled almost, like someone had taken their time. I assumed it was some old mounting system, maybe for shelves or a bulletin board. Weird, but not alarming. I forgot about it until the following Thursday. I'd been at the library until almost midnight working on an essay about Hitchcock's use of voyeurism in Rear Window. When I got back to my room, I was exhausted. I kicked off my shoes, plugged in my phone, and collapsed onto the bed without turning on the lights. The room was dark, except for the glow of the charging indicator. That's when I heard it. A voice. Muffled, distant, but definitely a voice. A man's voice, low and steady, speaking in a language I didn't recognize at first. I sat up, listened. It was coming from the wall. Not through the wall, like a neighbor talking, from the wall itself, from the area around those holes. I pressed my ear against the plaster. The voice got clearer, but only slightly. It sounded old, scratchy, like a recording played through a bad speaker. The man was speaking Japanese. I took 2 years of it in high school, enough to catch fragments. He was saying something about a meeting, a time, coordinates maybe? Then silence. I pulled back, heart pounding. I checked the time, 12:17 a.m. I went into the hallway, stood outside my neighbor's door, no light underneath, no sound. I knocked anyway. A girl named Priya answered, half asleep, annoyed. I asked if she'd heard anything. She said no and shut the door. Back in my room, I sat on the floor in front of the wall and waited. Nothing. I felt ridiculous. I convinced myself I'd imagined it, or that it was some acoustic quirk, sound traveling through the old pipes or vents. But it happened again 2 nights later. This time it was a woman. She was singing. A lullaby, I think, soft and lilting. I couldn't make out the words, but the melody was clear. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, then stopped abruptly, like someone had turned off a radio. I grabbed my phone and recorded the wall. When I played it back, there was nothing, just the hum of my mini-French. I started researching the building. Party Tower was built in 1963, but the land had history before that. During World War II, the area near campus had housed a temporary detention facility for Japanese American families before they were sent to the internment camps. I found a few mentions in old archives, nothing detailed. The facility was demolished in the late 40s. On Saturday, I ran into a guy named Colin from my History of Architecture seminar. I'd seen him around, always sketching in a moleskin, kind of intense. I mentioned the holes in my wall, described the pattern. He asked if he could see them. When he came over that afternoon, he didn't say anything at first, just crouched in front of the wall with a flashlight, measured the spacing with his fingers, took a few photos. Then he sat back on his heels and looked at me. "You know what this is?" he asked. I shook my head. "It's a listening array," he said, "used during the war, mostly by military intelligence, sometimes by private contractors hired to monitor detainees or suspected sympathizers. You drill holes at specific intervals, run a stethoscope-like device along them, and you can isolate sound from the other side. Different holes pick up different frequencies. It's primitive but effective." I felt cold. The other side of this wall is just another dorm room. "Now it is," Colin said. "But before this building went up, there could have been something else here. A wooden structure, temporary barracks, an office. If they were interrogating people or monitoring conversations, they'd use something like this." "That was 80 years ago," I said. "Yeah." He stood up, brushed off his jeans. "You want me to ask around? I know a professor who specializes in LA's war-era architecture. She might have records." I told him yes. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept imagining someone on the other side of that wall, decades ago, pressing their ear to those same holes, listening to frightened families, recording their words. I felt sick. Around 11, I heard it again. This time it was an argument. Two men, both speaking English with heavy accents. One was pleading, the other was stern, cold. I caught phrases, "I am a citizen, you don't understand, please, my children." Then a sound like a door slamming, and silence. I started taping over the holes. I used painter's tape at first, covering each one methodically. It took almost an hour. When I finished, the wall looked like it had been patched by someone with OCD. I sat on my bed and waited. At 12:03 a.m., I heard a woman's voice, clear as anything. She was speaking directly into my ear, even though I was 6 feet from the wall. "Evan," she said. My name. I didn't move. She said it again. "Evan, are you listening?" I wanted to rip the tape off, but I couldn't make myself move. The voice continued, softer now, almost affectionate. "You have to stop covering them. We need you to hear." I slept at my sister's place that night. When I came back the next afternoon, the tape was gone. Not peeled off. Gone. No residue, no torn edges. The holes were exposed again, clean as before. I called Colin. He came over with a girl named Maya who was doing her PhD in art history. She took one look at the wall and pulled out her laptop. Within 10 minutes, she'd found a floor plan from 1943. The building that had stood on this site before Pardee Tower was a processing center. The room I was in now had been an interrogation office. They would have used this exact technique, Maya said, pointing at the holes. Standard counterintelligence procedure. The subject would be on the other side, in what they called a soft room. The interrogator would sit here, listen, take notes. It was psychological. The person being interrogated never knew if they were being heard or not. "But the building's gone," I said. "This is concrete and steel. There's no other side anymore." Maya nodded slowly. "Right. So, either you're experiencing some kind of auditory hallucination, or..." She trailed off. "Or what?" "Or the holes are acting like a kind of antenna, picking up residual sound embedded in the space. It's not a scientific explanation, but there are theories about environments retaining impressions of traumatic events, especially in places where intense emotion was concentrated." Colin was quiet. Then he said, "Have you tried talking back?" I stared at him. "I'm serious," he said. "If this is some kind of loop, some kind of echo, maybe it's interactive. Maybe it needs acknowledgement." I didn't want to do it. But that night, alone in my room, I couldn't help myself. I sat in front of the wall and said, "I hear you." Nothing. I waited 5 minutes, then tried again. "I'm listening. What do you need?" At 12:17 a.m., the exact time I'd heard the first voice, a man spoke. The same Japanese man from before, but this time he wasn't talking about coordinates. He was saying a name, over and over. Kenji Tamura. Kenji Tamura. Kenji Tamura. I wrote it down. The next day, I searched the name. I found him in a database of internment camp records. Kenji Tamura, detained in 1942, processed through a facility in Los Angeles before being sent to Manzanar. His file listed a wife and 2 children. There was a photo, a small man with wire-rimmed glasses, unsmiling. I printed the photo and taped it above the holes. That night, I heard the lullaby again, but this time I recognized the voice. It was the same woman who'd said my name. She sang for maybe a minute, and then she spoke. "Thank you," she said. The voices stopped after that. For 3 weeks, the wall was silent. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then, last week, I came back from winter break. I'd spent a month at home in San Jose, tried not to think about the room. When I unlocked the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Stale air, dust, something faintly chemical. The photo of Kenji Tamura was gone. The tape I'd used to hang it was still there, but the paper had vanished. And the holes, every single one of them, had been filled. Smooth, plastered over, painted the same pale yellow as the rest of the wall. I ran my hand across the surface. You couldn't even tell they'd been there. I reported it to housing maintenance. They had no record of any work being done in my room. I haven't heard the voices since, but sometimes, late at night, I press my ear against the wall anyway, and I swear I can feel something on the other side. Not sound exactly, more like breath, like someone waiting. I graduate in 4 months. I've already found a subletter. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. When the woman said my name, when she asked if I was listening, her voice wasn't coming from the past. It was coming from right now. People keep asking me why I transferred dorms mid-semester, and I still don't have a good answer I can say out loud. I'm 21 years old, a junior studying journalism at North Dakota State University in Fargo, and I've always been the kind of person who needs answers. My mom says I asked why more than any other word as a kid. That trait got me into journalism. It also got me into what happened last semester, and I'm still not entirely sure how to process it. I lived in Bergham Hall, one of the older dorms on campus. 8 floors, built in 1968, renovated twice but still showing its age in the radiator clanks and the way certain hallways smelled like dust and old carpet glue. I was on the 5th floor. The building had strict quiet hours from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., enforced by RAs who would actually write you up if your music was too loud or if you were laughing in the halls past midnight. It started on a Thursday in October. I woke up at 2:22 a.m. to a voice coming through the PA system in my room. Not an alarm, just a calm, almost pleasant female voice. She said my name, Leah Ortiz. Then a pause. Then, check your left shoe. I sat up in bed, confused and half asleep. My roommate, Sierra, was gone for the week visiting family. The room was dark except for the green glow of my alarm clock. The PA clicked off. I turned on my phone flashlight and looked at my sneakers by the door. The left one had the lace untied. That was it. I tied it and went back to bed, figuring it was some weird prank or a malfunction. The next night, it happened to my neighbor across the hall. I know because she knocked on my door at 8 in the morning, eyes red, asking if she'd heard the PA at night. Her name was Vanessa. She was pre-med, stressed all the time, and we weren't close, but we'd talk sometimes. She said the voice had said her name and told her to close the window. "Did you close it?" I asked. "It was already closed," she said. "But I checked it anyway. The lock was loose. If I hadn't tightened it, it might have blown open." I felt a small chill, but brushed it off. Old building, loose hardware, coincidence. By Monday, it had happened to 8 people on our floor. Always between 2 and 3 a.m. Always the same calm voice. Always a name, then a short instruction. Move your keys. Turn off the lamp. Check the outlet. And always, the instructions seemed to correspond to something small going wrong later. A girl named Priya was told to unplug her phone charger. The next afternoon, that outlet sparked and had to be replaced. Another guy, Jordan, was told to move his bike from the hallway. Maintenance found a water leak in the ceiling above where it had been. People started talking about it in hushed tones. Some thought it was an RA prank. Others thought it was someone hacking the PA. A few were genuinely freaked out and requested room changes, but housing said the building was full. I'm a journalist. I wanted to know what was happening. I started asking around. I found out the PA system in Bergham was ancient, partly analog, installed in the 70s and only partially updated over the years. Most buildings on campus had switched to fully digital systems, but Bergham's retrofitting had been delayed due to budget issues. The RAs told me they had no control over individual room speakers. Only the main desk could broadcast, and only the housing director had the access code. I checked with the front desk. No broadcasts had been authorized after hours. No one had logged into the system. I filed a request under the student press credentials I had with the campus paper and got access to maintenance records. That's when I found the note about the sealed wing. Bergham Hall used to have a 9th floor. Well, not exactly. The building had an attic level that was converted into a small residential wing in the early 70s used for overflow housing. In 1979, it was permanently closed after a fire. No one died, but the damage was enough that they sealed it off rather than renovate. The entrance was behind a locked door on the 8th floor, and according to the records, no one had accessed it in decades. I also found a mention in a work order from 2003. A maintenance worker had gone up there to check on some wiring and noted possible audio equipment, origin unknown, nothing further. That was enough for me. I convinced Vanessa to come with me. She didn't want to, but she wasn't sleeping well, and I think she wanted closure as much as I did. We went up to the 8th floor at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. The hallway was empty. The door to the sealed wing was at the end of the hall, painted the same beige as the walls. Easy to miss. It had a padlock, but the metal was old and rusted. Vanessa kept watch while I used a crowbar I'd borrowed from the scene shop in the theater building. It took 2 tries, but the lock snapped. The door opened into a stairwell. The air was stale and cold. Our phone flashlights cut weak beams into the darkness. The stairs were concrete, covered in dust. We climbed. The 9th floor was smaller than I expected, just a single hallway, maybe 10 rooms on each side. The doors were all closed. The carpet was burned in patches, and the walls were stained with old smoke damage. There were no windows. It smelled like mildew and something else, something sour. Halfway down the hall, we found the room. The door was ajar. Inside was a small space, maybe 10 by 10, with a desk, a chair, and a metal rack holding old audio equipment. Reel-to-reel tape players, a mixing board, a microphone on a stand, and a thick cable running from the equipment through a hole in the wall. Vanessa touched my arm. "Leah, we should go." I ignored her and stepped closer. There were labels on the tapes. Names. Dozens of them. Some I recognized from our floor. Some I didn't. I picked one up. It was labeled Leah Ortiz. I felt my stomach drop. I put the tape on the player and hit play. Static. Then the voice. Calm. Pleasant. Leah Ortiz. Check your left shoe. I stopped the tape. My hands were shaking. Vanessa was at the door. "Leah, we need to leave right now." I looked at the other tapes. Some were labeled with dates. The oldest I could see was from 1977. I pulled one at random, a name I didn't recognize. I played it. Michael Haugen. Do not leave your door unlocked. I played another. Sandra Yee. Tighten the bolt on your desk lamp. All instructions, all small, all specific. I asked Vanessa to check the cable. She traced it along the wall and into the next room. That door was locked, but there was a window in the hallway that looked into it. She shone her light through. Inside were filing cabinets. Dozens of them. "Leah," she said quietly, "we need to call someone." I wanted to, but I also wanted to understand. I found a logbook on the desk. It was old, the pages yellowed. The handwriting was tight and neat. Entries dated back to 1974. Each entry had a name, a date, a time, and a brief note. Prevented fall, prevented fire, prevented injury. The last entry was from October 16, 1979. System malfunction. Wing evacuated. Protocol suspended. I looked at the date on my phone. October 23. We were 8 days past the anniversary. Vanessa grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" I listened. At first, nothing. Then, faint, from somewhere down the hall, I heard it. The hum of machinery. The soft click of a tape starting. Then, through the walls, echoing from below, I heard the PA crackle to life. A calm, pleasant voice. "Vanessa Cho, Leave the building. Vanessa went pale. She turned and ran. I followed. We made it back to the 5th floor. Vanessa went to her room, grabbed her keys and wallet, and left. She didn't come back for 3 days. I didn't leave. I stayed up, laptop open, trying to piece it together. I filed a report with campus safety the next morning. They sent someone to check the 9th floor. They found the equipment. They found the tapes. The campus paper ran a story about it. The university issued a statement about unauthorized materials and historical artifacts and promised a full investigation. But here's the thing they didn't put in the statement. Here's the thing I only found out because I kept digging. The system wasn't broadcasting anymore. The tapes were old. The equipment hadn't been powered in years. The maintenance worker who checked confirmed it. No electricity, no signal. But people still heard the voice. 3 more times that week, all after the equipment was removed. And the instructions still matched accidents. A guy named Connor was told to move his chair. He didn't. It collapsed the next day. A girl named Erica was told to check her heater. She ignored it. It started smoking that night. I listened to my tape again before they took it. Check your left shoe. I thought about that loose lace. I thought about the stairs I took that morning, still half asleep, stumbling in the dark. If I hadn't tied it, I might have tripped. I don't live in Bergam anymore. I transferred to an off-campus apartment. But sometimes, late at night, I think about those filing cabinets, about all those names, about the logbook that ended in 1979. And I think about the entry I found on the last page, the one I didn't tell anyone about. It just said, "System will resume when needed." I don't know what that means. I don't know if I want to. But 2 weeks ago, my friend texted me from Bergam. She just moved into a 5th floor room. She said she woke up at 2:22 a.m. to a voice saying her name. If you're ever asked to participate in a university sleep study, read the consent forms carefully. I mean, really read them. Check what they're allowed to record, who has access, how long they keep the data. I thought I knew what I was signing up for when I agreed to help Dr. Reyes. I was a graduate student, an RA, someone who understood research protocols. I was wrong about what I was helping with. I was 23 that fall, working as an RA at Stanford while finishing my master's in cognitive science. I'd taken the job because the housing stipend made things possible, and because I genuinely liked helping undergrads navigate their first year away from home. I was good at it. Patient, steady, the kind of person people felt comfortable confiding in. That's probably why they asked me to help with the sleep study. Dr. Reyes ran it out of the psychology department. She needed someone on site in the dorms to manage the technical side, making sure the recording equipment stayed running, troubleshooting when students had issues with the sensors, that sort of thing. The study itself was straightforward. Volunteers wore a headband that monitored sleep stages and recorded audio throughout the night. The goal was to analyze sleep-talking patterns and correlate them with REM cycles. 30 students signed up from my building alone, lured by the $200 stipend and the promise they were contributing to science. I had a small office in the basement of the dorm where the server was kept. Every morning, the overnight recordings would upload automatically to an encrypted cloud drive that only Dr. Reyes could access. My job was just to make sure the pipeline worked. I never listened to the files. That would have been a violation of the protocol, not to mention creepy as hell. 3 weeks into the semester, I started noticing the hidden folder. It appeared in the local backup directory on the server, not on the cloud side, just locally. I'd been doing routine maintenance, clearing out temporary files when I saw it. The folder was labeled processed_secondary, and it contained audio files with timestamps that matched the main study recordings, but the file sizes were much smaller, compressed maybe, or excerpted. I figured it was some automated sorting process Dr. Reyes had set up. Maybe the software was flagging certain audio segments for review. I made a note to ask her about it the next time we met, then forgot. 2 days later, one of the participants, a freshman named Alicia, came to my office hours visibly shaken. She said she'd had the worst anxiety spike of her life that morning, convinced her boyfriend was cheating on her. No reason, no evidence, just a sudden, overwhelming certainty. She'd confronted him. He'd admitted to kissing someone at a party 3 nights earlier. He'd planned to tell her that weekend, he said. He swore it was only a kiss. Alicia withdrew from the study that afternoon. I filed the paperwork and didn't think much of it. College relationships implode all the time. The next week, another participant, Marcus, missed 2 classes because he was convinced he'd left his wallet in a campus building he hadn't visited in months. He spent hours retracing steps that didn't make sense, absolutely certain of a memory that turned out to be false. When he finally found the wallet, it was exactly where he'd left it, in his desk drawer. But someone had gone through it. $12 missing. His roommate admitted it later that day, said he'd been planning to pay him back before Marcus noticed. Then there was Priya, who suddenly decided not to call her mother on her birthday, even though she always did, even though her mother was expecting it. Priya couldn't explain why. She just felt like she shouldn't. Her mother ended up in the ER that night, a minor fall, nothing serious, but she'd been trying to call Priya for hours, panicking, and Priya's phone had been off. Priya sobbed in my office, asking why she'd ignored her instincts to reach out. I started paying attention to the pattern. All 3 of them were study participants. All 3 had experienced something like premonition, not about anything huge, just small, private disruptions. And all 3 had acted on feelings they couldn't explain. That's when I opened the hidden folder. I didn't plan to. I was doing another server check and the folder was just there, and I was curious, and maybe a little concerned about what I was seeing. I told myself I'd listen to just 1 file, just to see what the secondary processing was doing. The file I clicked on was labeled with Alicia's participant ID and a timestamp from 4 nights before she confronted her boyfriend. At first, it was just the usual sleep sounds, breathing, shifting fabric, little murmurs. Then, about 2 minutes in, I heard her voice, barely a whisper, slurred with sleep. He kissed her. Thursday. He's going to tell you. Saturday. Don't wait. That was it. 8 seconds of audio, then silence. I sat there staring at the waveform on the screen. Alicia had sleep-talked the exact thing that happened 3 days before she had any reason to suspect it. No, that wasn't quite right. She'd said it in her sleep before it happened at all. The party was Thursday, she'd confronted him Sunday. The recording was from Monday night. I checked Marcus's file next. Same structure. Hours of normal sleep audio, then a short segment isolated and clear. Roommate took the money Tuesday. It's in his desk. You won't find your wallet where you think. Priya's was the worst. Don't call her tomorrow. If you call, she'll rush. If she rushes, she'll fall. I went through every file in that folder, 27 participants, each with multiple recordings. Every single one contained whispered fragments like this, small predictions, warnings, insights into things that hadn't happened yet but were about to. A student mumbling about a quiz question that would appear on an exam later that week. Another describing an argument with a professor over an extension they hadn't yet requested. One girl reciting the exact words her father would use to tell her he'd lost his job. The timestamps showed the whispers always came during deep REM sleep, usually in the early morning hours. And according to the file metadata, every single recording had been made at least 2 to 5 days before the events they described. I didn't know what to do with this. I didn't know if I was interpreting it right or if there was some technical explanation I was missing. I thought about calling Dr. Reyes, but something stopped me. The folder was hidden. She had to know it was there, had to have set up whatever process was extracting these segments. And she hadn't mentioned it to me, hadn't mentioned it to the students in the consent forms. That's when I saw the file with my name on it. Not my participant ID. I wasn't in the study. My actual name, Jamal Torres_10.08.WAV. I'd been wearing one of the test headbands a week earlier. Dr. Reyes had asked me to try it overnight to make sure the latest firmware update wasn't causing discomfort. Just one night, she'd said, just to check the fit. I'd forgotten I'd even done it. My hands were shaking when I opened the file. The recording started the same way as the others. Breathing, the rustle of sheets. Then my own voice, thick with sleep, barely audible. "Don't call her. Tomorrow at 3. You're going to want to, but don't. If you do, everything stops. Just don't." I checked my phone. It was 2:47 p.m. on October 9th. I didn't recognize the impulse at first, but as I sat there, I became aware of it. A vague sense that I needed to call my sister. We hadn't talked in a few weeks, and I'd been meaning to check in. It wasn't urgent, it never was with us, just the normal sibling maintenance call. But the feeling was there, soft and insistent, like an itch I'd been ignoring all day. I looked at the timestamp on the recording again, October 8th, 4:23 a.m., less than 36 hours ago. I sat in that basement office for an hour, watching the clock. At 3:15, I picked up my phone. My sister's contact was right there. I could feel the urge to call her, stronger now, almost physical. I put the phone down. At 3:32, she texted me. "Hey, you around? Need to ask you something." I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the call button. It would have been so easy, so normal. I texted back instead. "Busy right now. What's up?" She didn't answer for 20 minutes. When she did, it was brief. "NVM, figured it out." I waited for something else. Some disaster I'd avoided, some consequence that didn't land. Nothing happened. The afternoon was quiet. I went to a department meeting at 4. I made dinner. I helped the student with a roommate conflict. Everything was fine, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I hadn't done. The next day, I searched for any literature on predictive dreaming, precognitive sleep states, anything that might explain what I'd heard. There was nothing credible. Plenty of fringe theories, anecdotal reports, but no real science. Dr. Reyes's publications didn't mention anything like this. Her research was mainstream: circadian rhythms, memory consolidation, standard sleep architecture. I checked the server again. The hidden folder was gone. Not deleted, gone. No trace in the logs, no residual files, like it had never existed. I tried to access the cloud drive, but my credentials didn't work anymore. I emailed Dr. Reyes asking about it, keeping the tone casual, just a technical question. She replied the same day. The study had wrapped up its data collection phase earlier than expected. The equipment had been returned to the lab. She thanked me for my help and said she'd send over the final paperwork for my hours. I never heard from her again. I asked the students who'd been in the study if anyone had contacted them for follow-up. Most said no. A few mentioned they'd gotten a brief exit survey, nothing unusual. When I asked if they'd noticed anything strange during the study, odd dreams, intuitions, moments of déjà vu, they looked at me like I was being weird. Alicia had transferred schools by winter quarter. Marcus stopped coming to hall events. Priya graduated early and moved back home. I kept working as an RA through the end of the year, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I started paying attention to my dreams, writing them down when I woke up. Most were normal, incoherent, the standard nonsense. But every once in a while, I'd catch a fragment that felt different, sharper, more like a voice than a thought. I haven't acted on any of them. I don't know if the things I hear in my sleep are predictions or suggestions. I don't know if they're my subconscious working through anxiety or something else entirely. I don't know what would have happened if I'd called my sister that day, or what she needed to ask me, or what she figured out on her own. What I do know is that I still have the urge sometimes, late at night, to check if that folder has come back. I don't let myself look. I deleted my access to the server, requested a transfer to a different building for the next year. I don't talk to anyone from that study anymore. But I still wake up sometimes in those early hours, right at the edge of REM, and I can feel myself on the verge of saying something. My mouth starts to form words I haven't thought yet, and I have to force myself awake before they come out, because I don't want to know what I'm about to say. I don't want to hear what I already know. I tried to explain this to the university health services counselor once, during spring semester of my sophomore year. I made it about 3 sentences in before I saw the look on her face, that careful, concerned expression they train you to make when someone's having a breakdown. So I pivoted, said I was just stressed about midterms, took the pamphlet about sleep hygiene, and left. I never went back. But the thing is, I wasn't having a breakdown. I was sleeping 4 hours a night because something in my building wouldn't let me sleep. And by the time I figured out what it was, I'd already heard my name whispered in an empty room. I'm 20 years old, a sophomore at UMass Amherst, and I hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks when I finally decided to do something about the piano. My name's Maya. I'm pre-med, which means I'm supposed to be organized, rational, the kind of person who doesn't let things pile up until they become problems. But that semester, I was barely holding it together. My roommate had dropped out over winter break, so I had a double to myself in the retrofit, this old residence hall they'd renovated a few years back. The building used to be something else, offices maybe, before they converted it. The rooms were bigger than the newer dorms, but had this weird layout, like they'd carved apartments out of spaces that weren't meant to be lived in. The piano started the second week of February, always at 3 in the morning. Not 3:02, not 3:05, exactly 3:03, like someone had set an alarm. At first I thought it was coming from upstairs, but I was on the 4th floor, the top floor. Then I thought maybe it was outside, some street musician or a sound installation, but when I looked out the window, there was never anyone there. Just the empty quad in the parking lot, snow piled up along the curbs. It wasn't loud, that was the thing. If it had been loud, I could have complained, gotten an RA involved, made it someone else's problem. But it was soft, muffled, like it was traveling through layers of insulation and old plaster. A simple melody, the kind you'd play for a child. The same few bars, over and over for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Then, silence. I started wearing earplugs. That worked for a few nights until I realized I could still hear it, or feel it maybe. A vibration in the walls that my body registered even when my ears didn't. I'd lie there in the dark, my heart rate climbing, knowing it was happening even though I couldn't quite hear it anymore. By the 3rd week, I was averaging 4 hours of sleep a night. I was missing morning classes, forgetting assignments, zoning out during labs. My advisor sent me a concerned email. I didn't know how to explain that I was being kept awake by a piano that might not actually exist. That's when I decided to record it. I set my phone on the desk, plugged it in, opened a voice memo app, and left it recording all night. I didn't really expect it to pick anything up. I think part of me hoped it wouldn't, that I'd listen back to 8 hours of silence and know I'd been imagining the whole thing. That would have been easier, honestly. I could have gone to health services, gotten some sleep medication, moved on. But when I checked the recording the next morning, scrubbing through the timeline, there it was, a spike in the waveform at 3:03 a.m. I put in headphones and listened. The piano was there, clear and distinct, that same lullaby melody, simple and repetitive. But underneath it, or woven into it somehow, there was something else, a woman's voice, humming along. And underneath that, so quiet I had to turn the volume all the way up and replay it 4 times to be sure, a second voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words at first. It was like trying to hear a conversation in another room, just the rhythm and cadence of speech without the content. I exported the file, loaded it into Audacity, boosted the gain, isolated the frequencies. The whisper was saying names. Student names, I realized, after I heard my own. Maya Alvarez. Then others. Connor Hughes, Stephanie Yao, David Ortega. People I knew from my floor, from classes, from the dining hall. The voice pronounced each name carefully, deliberately, like it was reading from a list. I sat there at my desk, staring at the waveform on my laptop screen, trying to make sense of it. My hands were shaking. I played it again. The lullaby, the humming, the whisper. It was all there. It was real. I didn't go to class that day. I stayed in my room and tried to figure out where the sound was coming from. I put my ear against every wall, the ceiling, the floor. The east wall, the one I shared with the stairwell, seemed the most likely. The sound was slightly louder there, or maybe I just wanted it to be. I needed a source, an explanation, something physical I could point to. That night I waited up. At 3:03 a.m. exactly, it started. I pressed my palm flat against the east wall and felt it, a faint vibration, rhythmic and steady. I grabbed my keys and went out into the hallway. The stairwell was empty. Fluorescent lights, cinder block walls painted institutional beige, that specific silence of a building full of sleeping people. I went down one floor, listened. Nothing. Down another floor. Nothing. I kept going, all the way to the basement, which wasn't supposed to be accessible to students, but the door was always propped open with a brick. The basement was unfinished, just concrete and exposed pipes and old furniture the college had stored down there. It smelled like mildew and heating oil. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. The piano was louder here, not by much, but enough to tell I was getting closer. I followed the sound past a room full of broken desks, past a storage cage filled with bundled-up area rugs, to a corridor I hadn't noticed before. It was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, and it ended in a door with a small window of reinforced glass. The window was covered from the inside with something dark. The piano was coming behind that door. I tried the handle. Locked. I knocked, quietly at first, then louder. The music didn't stop. I called out, "Hello? Is someone in there?" My voice sounded thin and stupid in the empty corridor. The music stopped. I waited, my pulse loud in my ears, watching that covered window for any sign of movement. Nothing. 30 seconds passed. A minute. I knocked again. Nothing. I went back upstairs. I didn't sleep. At some point, I heard my neighbor's alarm go off through the wall, the muffled sound of someone starting their day. When it was light out, I texted my friend Stephanie, asked if she wanted to get breakfast. She said sure, but when she met me in the dining hall, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "You look like shit," I said. "Thanks, you too." We got coffee and found a table by the windows. I watched her add sugar to her cup, 3 packets, which was weird because Stephanie always drank her coffee black. She saw me staring. "What?" "Nothing, just, you feeling okay?" "I'm fine. Didn't sleep great." "Yeah, me neither." She stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. 3 times, pause, 3 times, pause, 3 times. A rhythm I'd heard before. "Stephanie." "What? Why are you stirring your coffee like that?" She looked down at the cup, confused. "Like what?" I watched her for the rest of breakfast. She kept doing small things that didn't fit, tapping her fingers on the table in that same 3-beat pattern, humming under her breath when she thought I wasn't paying attention. At one point, she started to say something, then stopped and looked at me oddly, like she'd forgotten who I was for a second. "Did you hear anything weird last night?" "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe music, maybe?" She thought about it. "No." "Why?" I didn't answer. I couldn't explain it without sounding paranoid, but over the next few days, I started noticing it in other people too. Connor from my chemistry lab adding sugar to his coffee, even though he was diabetic and never touched the stuff. David, who lived 2 doors down, humming that melody while he waited for the elevator. Small things, behavioral tics that didn't quite fit, and all of them looked tired. I went back to the basement 3 more times. The door was always locked. The music always stopped when I knocked. On the fourth visit, I found a maintenance closet with a key box inside. Most of the hooks empty, but one labeled B12 in faded marker. I tried it in the door. It fit. The room on the other side was smaller than I expected, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. There was a piano against the far wall, an old upright, its wood case dark with age. No bench, no stool, nothing to sit on. The room was empty except for the piano and a filing cabinet in the corner. I stood in the doorway, my hand still on the key, trying to understand what I was seeing. There was no dust on the piano keys. Someone had been playing it recently, but there was no one in the room, no other exits, just the door I'd come through and 4 walls. I checked the filing cabinet. It was unlocked. Inside were old maintenance logs going back decades, some of them still typed on actual typewriters. I flipped through them, not sure what I was looking for, until I found entries from 1987. Repeated complaints about noise from B12, residents hearing music at night. The logs documented multiple visits by maintenance staff. Each entry said the same thing: room empty, no source found. Then, in March of 1987, a note in different handwriting. B12 sealed per admin request. Do not enter. But B12 wasn't sealed. I was standing in it. I kept looking through the logs. Further back, older entries, some so faded I could barely read them. In 1983, before the building was a dorm, there was a reference to an employee, a custodian named Margaret Hess, who lived on site in the basement. There was a memo about a missing person report filed by her sister. Then nothing. No resolution, no follow-up. I took photos of the pages with my phone and got out of there. That night, I didn't wait for the music. At 3 a.m., I went down to the basement with my laptop and my phone and let myself in to B12. I set up my laptop on top of the filing cabinet, opened the audio recording software, and waited. At 3:03 a.m., the piano keys moved. Not all of them, just the ones needed for the melody. They depressed smoothly, mechanically, like someone was sitting there playing. But there was no one. I watched them move, one after another, in perfect time. The sound was the same as I had been hearing for weeks, that simple lullaby echoing in the small concrete room. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just watched and recorded. The melody played for 11 minutes. Then it stopped. The keys settled back into place. Silence. I waited another 5 minutes, then packed up my laptop and left. My hands were steady, my heart rate was normal. I felt weirdly calm, like I'd just confirmed something I'd always known. I didn't go back to the basement after that. I didn't need to. I had my recording, I had the maintenance logs, I had enough to know that whatever was happening had been happening for a long time, long enough that the college had tried to seal the room and failed, long enough that they'd just stopped acknowledging it. The music kept happening every night at 3:03 a.m. I got used to it. After a while, I could sleep through it, or at least I didn't let it keep me awake anymore. I stopped recording it. I stopped checking on people to see if they were acting strange. I finished the semester, moved to a different dorm for junior year, and tried not to think about it. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. Last week, I ran into Stephanie on campus. We hadn't really talked since that breakfast back in February. She looked good, healthy, rested. We chatted for a minute, caught up on classes and summer plans. Then, just as we were saying goodbye, she said something that made me stop. "Hey, do you remember that thing you asked me about? The music?" "Yeah?" "I've been having the weirdest dreams lately. There's this woman and she's singing to me, and I can't see her face, but I know she knows my name. It's the same dream every time." She laughed, uncomfortable. "It's probably nothing. I just thought it was weird that you asked about music and now I keep dreaming about someone singing." I told her it was probably just stress. She agreed and we said goodbye. I watched her walk away, humming under her breath. It was the lullaby. I still live in Amherst. I'm almost done with my degree. Sometimes, late at night when I'm walking home from the library, I pass the retrofit and look up at the 4th floor, at the window that used to be mine. The lights are always off, but I think about the students sleeping in those rooms, about the piano in the basement, about the list of names that keeps growing year after year. And I wonder sometimes, what happens when the list is complete?